just wait for people. There are some seats up here.
Sit there? Yeah. You can say the receipts.
Yeah, we also have some seats, a couple of seats out there. If we have more people who want to sit down. Okay. So let's start. Yes. Okay. We will. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for so many people showing up to this session. We're talking about, is it kind of a clickbait that we have brought up to talk about sex and violence as the only ones here, and we will guarantee you we are going to talk about sex and violence, and that's going to take a little time, but we will get there, so it's not just clickbait. So welcome everyone. I am from International Media Support, where I work as an advisor, and I'll be introducing the others, but just give you a little bit about why and what it is that we are doing. We are a Danish-based organization that works to promote media freedom and to promote good journalism and safety for journalism in 5 continents. We have been growing over the years, and we work both in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, and we also work in Eastern Europe very much at the moment, and a bit in Latin America. And what we work on is actually to professionalize the media, independent media, especially in those regions. And we also work a lot, as all of you are probably aware of, there are more and more restrictions. The space is shrinking, like we say, for free words. And therefore we are also working a lot, and I will be in touch with our partners on how to do this in a more innovative way, because we actually need to find a way. And Magdalene, that we'll come back to, a media in Indonesia, is one of those where we together work innovative, and also with partners like Constructive Institute, in what can we also do in the style of approaching with what our partners want to do. So I would like to give the word from here to Cynara, who is from Constructive Institute. I can say that some of the ways we work is by constructive journalism, and I myself have been a fellow at the Constructive Institute, which is also based in Denmark, so I took a 1-year fellowship there, and this is the fruit of some of that we now work together. Cynara?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Cynara Vetch, and I'm the project lead for international partnerships and projects at Constructive Institute. And I'm here really to talk about the constructive lens piece of this panel, because what we do at Constructive Institute is work with the global industry right across different regions, not just the developing world, but looking at how can we find more solutions-focused, more nuanced, and more bridge-building forms of journalism. Because we've seen with digital disruption that this isn't just a question of needing new business models and new technology platforms. Actually, a lot of the tendencies of the news culture that have always been there, such as a very strong negative focus and a tendency towards the sensational and the shocking, have really been exacerbated by this digital disruption, and we want to work with organizations like IMS and Magdalene to find more constructive ways to do news.
Thank you. And Magdalene will be the main character through this session. And Devi, if you will introduce yourself also.
Thank you, Henrik. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I'm Devi. So my name is not Magdalene. That's the name of the media. Often people confuse that. But I'm Devi, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Magdalene. Magdalene is a women-focused, bilingual online magazine that is based in Indonesia, being our, the purpose of the raison d'etre of our company, of our media company. But we also, our mission is also to celebrate and diversity and inclusivity. We are also, we want to challenge norms, harmful norms and practices that has always been taken for granted. And we're using the lens of intersectional feminism in doing this, the journalistic work that we do. So that's basically our mission, is to educate and empower and push the society to become more equal. And so that's why I think
could you also talk a little bit about how your staff actually, how is it to work? You are, at least in our part of the world, with an audience around 600,000. You're actually quite big. Does that mean anything for your staff? Are there threats, dangers in the way you work?
Well, I think I can also take you to the context of Indonesia becoming, more increasingly conservative religious-wise in the past, couple of decades. So that, of course, impact the way, the way women are perceived, or some of the women's rights are being kind of taken back, and there's some efforts to put women back in the domestic realms within a society. I'm not saying the whole Indonesia. Of course, there's a lot more progress, but there's also some movement to try to bring a lot of religious, a lot more kind of conservative values into that. And so with that comes, of course, the challenge of running a media company that is that promotes feminist values, and often we are seen as bringing Western agenda or LGBTIQ agenda, and so we are still safe. We get a lot of online hatred, online hate speech and bullying and stuff like that. Our personnel, our staff get doxxed a lot on the internet. But at the same time, the fact that we're still survive is good, of course. But at the same time, this also shows the importance of us, still being there, and because within this increasing religious conservatism, there's also a lot of tension that comes out from young people who are our audience, who are being pressured from this, from being wedged into a world that is a lot more, that gives them a lot of restriction. And so we feel that our role here is to not just empower them, but also to make sure that they can navigate this space, their world, in a much more informed way and empowered way. So,
yeah, and still it was clear that you could not just stand up and say what you wanted to say. So you had to be looking, like you have mentioned it yourself, more for a solution-driven way of actually reporting. And that was when we got together, we said, okay, we are supporting from IMS, supporting Magdalene, but how can we do that in a more innovative way? What is it that we can add to that? And this was, so you came and you asked for that, and that was when we then teamed up with Constructive Institute, and where you also came in, so we did that together. And maybe you should then go through how the way to work constructive actually is.
Sure. So as I said, I think, thank you. I'm here to talk about this constructive lens piece. So Devi's talking about these issues of sex and violence, but how do you cover them in a way that does empower the readers and doesn't leave them feeling hopeless and overwhelmed by the challenges that there are? And we call this constructive journalism. There are different kind of phrases, but the idea is to say the traditional forms of journalism still remain incredibly important. Breaking news is vital to give timely information to people in an accurate way when they need it. And the old school pillars of investigative journalism, speaking truth to power, digging up untold stories that people need to know about, these pillars remain crucial. But if you keep going from problem to problem and challenge to challenge and uncover corruption and malpractice again and again and again, and you don't go beyond that to say, what next? What could be done differently? Who else has done differently? Where has this been solved? If we talk about the digital disruption issue, people have news on hand with them all the time, and they're overwhelmed by this. So we as journalists need to add an additional layer, and that's what constructive journalism is, and that's what we wanted to explore with Devi in an Indonesian context. And so with this additional layer, we think there are 3 key approaches, and this is to say that this is an evolving model, and what's really interesting about working in different contexts is this isn't a cookie-cutter thing that we just say, this will work everywhere. So maybe more approaches will evolve as we work in different places. But currently we believe that there are 3 pathways that journalists should really look at if they want to add this constructive layer. And the first is the focus on solutions, so not just to stop at the challenges, but to look beyond to what can be done. The second is nuance, and with this kind of competition for eyeballs, with different platforms and different content even beyond the news industry, more and more nuances tends to be lost. And so we believe that's a very important aspect. And the third is how can news media facilitate dialogue and connect people in conversations about these challenges. So to create safe spaces where people can have very different views, but they can at least start to understand each other and start to explore different ways forward. And Devi's going to talk more about that, but I think Magdalene does great things in that third pillar as well.
Yeah, so it's just to say that, because there is a saying somewhere that this constructive, solution-oriented is just positive journalism. It's not. We are actually all the time starting out with a problem, but not only looking at describing the problem, but also taking in the solution part of it. And that was what actually you were looking for also when you were asking, and we got together. But maybe going back to describe a little bit about the environment, what was the problem that we were going to look into? You could tell a little bit about that, Devi.
Yeah. Earlier I said about gender-based violence, and one of the types of the violence is sexual violence, which is really high in Indonesia. It's been acknowledged now more and more as a crisis, an urgent crisis. Every year the cases keep going up, as you can see in the number here, and these are just cases that are reported. So these are just the tip of the iceberg. Most are not reported, we did a survey a few years back, Magdalene, with a couple of organizations, and we saw, which involved 25,000 respondents, and we saw that not only that a lot of people have experienced sexual violence, and a lot of them before the age of 18, but they're also never reported the case, or even if they reported, rarely ever there's justice. So this is a really crucial issue, and one of the causes of this, why it keeps perpetuating, is that the existing laws are not enough. There is not strong enough law to bring justice to this, or to prevent from the sexual violence. So so this becomes one of the key or focus issues for Magdalene, because in Indonesia, we also deal a lot with stigmas, with social stigmas, and sexual violence is still seen as a morality issue instead of the violence issue or public health issues even. And there's a lot of misinformation that is going around. There's a very aggressive spread of narratives against efforts to come up with initiative to end this, including the introduction of the anti-sexual violence bill, which is often painted as a Western liberal agenda. And also religious conservatism, the rise of religious conservatism is also preventing transparent and balanced reporting on sexual violence in terms of, because it's still being seen as a sexuality or morality issues instead of violence issues. I want to show you the next slide, which is one of the problems as well. That this woman is a commissioner of the National Commission for Child Protection, which is a very important commission to prevent sexual violence, one of them against children. And she, when I talk about misinformation, this is one of the things that happened, is that she made a comment about, people can get pregnant out of just being in the same swimming pool with men, and she's a very educated person. I think she has, graduate degrees and all that, but it still doesn't prevent her from spreading narratives like that. So when we talk about the sexual violence aspect of this, we think about what is the problem, what is the root of the problem, and we decided that one of them is the lack of sexual education, or comprehensive sexual education, that could prevent a lot of the negative things that are happening, including sexual violence.
Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit more also about how the law is in Indonesia today for sex education.
So there's no right now. There are no sexual education in terms of the comprehensive. When we talk about not just the reproductive system, but also the sexuality part. Schools teach the reproductive parts, and nobody, of course, talks about sexuality because, of course, it's a morality issue, and it's seen as, promoting, premarital sex. And so it just, it leaves the young people with this vacuum of information on sexuality, and often that this affects, like as I put this here, like not only your typical spread of STDs and stuff, but also and teen pregnancy, but also sexual violence and school dropout because of teen pregnancy and violence, relational violence, or violence within a romantic relationship. So. I think that's, basically we don't have.
Basically, there are no laws, and it's going in the wrong direction, right?
It's just there are no efforts to introduce comprehensive sexual education in school, because it's seen as, taboo, and there will be a lot of political opposition to it.
Yeah, and beforehand, whenever you touch upon it, it was dangerous for you, and at the same time, you were just seen as Western influenced, or how was that?
I think the lack of conversation around it also makes it a taboo conversation. And we think, we're not the first one to be talking about this. There are some NGOs that have been raising these issues, but it doesn't get widely publicized. And so what we did was, instead, we tried to center this on the teens themselves, on the teenagers. When we talk about sexual education, we want this to come from the teenagers. Often when we talk about sexual education, it's a lot of it is prescriptive. It comes from older people, it comes from the adults, from the academic people, and from, you know, the religious organizations and things like that. So what happened is that we, you know, as we will talk about this later, but we create a project that center on sexual education, but center it on the teens themselves, you know, to hear their voices. And
but to put it together, we have a huge problem. What have been tried so far has really not worked out. Mm-hmm. Then you could ask, is it the job of the media to look into that? Why or how is that with that special position you feel you have in this?
Well, first of all, we make this a campaign, and this is not new for us. Before, we've covered sexual violence issues also in ways that are, you know, mainstream media would not do. Like I told you before, in 2016, we had this survey on the sexual violence and, you know, justice system and all that stuff. And it was part of a bigger campaign on Start to Talk, which is kind of like a Me Too movement. And what we do is that we get data by doing a survey, and then we run some journalistic work, you know, some journalistic output, and then we also have other things like we engage with people. We even went to TV talk shows and things like that. So it's a big campaign that we work with other organizations as well. And then a couple of years ago also, during the pandemic, when we heard that there is an increasing number of women being in domestic violence or experiencing domestic violence, we came up with this initiative of Safe Space to not only cover all aspects of violence against women during the pandemic era, but also to provide database for them to get, service providers, which is not very integrated in Indonesia. And so this is the kind of things that we do beyond just, doing journalistic work, creating articles or other things, but we also try to see, like, how can we come up with solution or offer solution or point people to the right direction for solutions. That was before we met you guys, of course. We kind of did this instinctively.
So you were already on this solution wagon, you could
sort
say.
Of path. Yeah.
And then we met up and we decided to make a 5-module that I can just show you here, training curriculum that we are also going to use globally. So this was the first example, or the first case we had was with Magdalene. So we had some clear problems to be up against, and we have a way from the Constructive Institute on how to actually change the way of thinking. The great thing here was that you as a whole team were involved with this. Other places you get one journalist from a media who then come back and sort of act like the Trojan horse and tell from inside what to do. That is one way of doing it. But here, where we could work with the media, both in terms of engagement with the journalists and so on, we felt that we had a big playground. Can you say some more on how we did that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what was really important for us wasn't to just come in, show a few kind of approaches and formats and say, okay, great, you're a constructive news media now, but really think about once everyone in Devi's team, from the graphic designers to the engagement team, she's got a great social media team, to the feature writers, to Devi herself, once there was an understanding of the different approaches there, what did that mean for Magdalene itself? Magdalene. For it, and how would these approaches work best? So although we're talking about a sexual education project and campaign, which we think was great and very thorough, what was really important was to think about how these elements and ideas and news culture would be there sustainable within Magdalene. And so that's what we focused on a lot. And then what was really exciting for us was that the team was also interested in training up other Indonesian journalists. So we did a program where not only was this is what constructive journalism is, but this is what it could mean for your organization and be sustained. And this is how you could then take these ideas to other news media within the country. And that's particularly interesting for us because there are all these elements of news culture and news ideas in countries like Indonesia that we don't necessarily know about. So if we can work with news media who want to train themselves, it's much more effective. And these are very flexible approaches, so maybe certain issues that we think about just won't work in an Indonesian context. And so that's what this 5-part module meant for us. And we're almost, I wouldn't say we're in the middle of it, but we're definitely at the beginning of the training of trainers piece and how that will unfold.
But maybe we can go through the modules.
Sure.
If we get the PowerPoint, please.
Can you click on it?
Yeah, click. Okay, so it's me.
No.
No, it's not. Could we, for the technical team, could you please put on this PowerPoint we have now? Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the first 2 modules were breaking down the concept. Firstly, what we've been talking about here a lot, why should any news media be thinking about these approaches, and what are the issues that they address, and then what the approaches are, with lots of regional examples, and really thinking about where is the Indonesian news media now, and what could be done differently. And then module 3 is what I was talking about, like, what does this mean for a Magdalene context? How could this be really practically put through in an editorial meeting or in a workflow to create a campaign or something?
So it was 3 hours for each of the modules, and this was during the height of Corona. So it meant that we had to start out with people we did not know, that we had not met, and introducing a new way of thinking. But I actually think there was an incredible appetite for learning and for taking these new ways in from your team's side. And we especially when we went to module 4, where it was for Magdalene to, after what we had put forward, to make their way of looking at constructive journalism. And we saw some brilliant examples that came back. And then, as Cynara was saying, we are now in the middle of the training of trainers, because we really want Magdalene then to train others in Indonesia, and it seems that there is an appetite for that also. But I don't know if you can talk a little bit about how you felt this. You had been on the solution-oriented, but what did it mean to get this training for you and your staff?
Yeah, I think once we were hooked together and we received a training, and I knew right then that I couldn't just rely on me to learn this. I have to get everybody involved, because this is supposed to be part of our pillars. And so then we learned that constructive journalism is not just about solution, but there are other things that are part of this, and Henrik will show you, the compass later on. But one that is also that we can still build, according to our needs, our, specific need as a media within our context, the region or whatever, the niche that we are in. So one of the things that we learn is that, being a feminist media organization, we do a lot of calling out, right? We expose things as they are. We talk about, problematic stuff and, problems, a lot of problems. But once we learn this, we also think that now how can we, instead of just highlighting this, how can we either point to the, to the solutions, but also how can we dig deeper and find nuances out of this? So that's one. And then the other thing is also, how can we build this into a conversation and sustain it as a conversation? And, and then we, as we can become part of the solution, we can get the ball rolling towards a better, whatever end of our ultimate goal is. So that's what happens with the sexual education. Of course, we're not saying that we're gonna solve every problem, but it's it's becoming part, or it's the effort to become part of the solution. I think it's important. The intention becomes different. As a journalist myself, I've been around for almost 30 years as a journalist. I think this is a change in mindset for me, and I think because a lot of my staff are new in journalism, they're quite young. It's good also to kind of start this, young, for them to know that as a journalist, you can do this. You can be part of the solution, not just highlighting the problems. But
and exactly talking about being young, your audience is right young.
Yeah.
Quite young. Do you think, could you talk a little bit about that, and also the engagement, how your policy is there? Because I think that matters a lot, and that's also where we as Western media perhaps are a bit behind, because we have older audiences, we have problems in getting the new audiences, and perhaps this constructive mindset also helps getting young people, because they don't want to only be into the problems.
Yeah.
Or
part of I guess what is big in Magdalene is not just editorial content, but also engagement. So that's what I think you were mentioning earlier. Engagement means not just, engagement means using or optimizing, what we have right now, which is social media. Later may be different, but right now social media platforms. And we're quite big in social media. I mean, I don't know if you know, Asian peoples are also very big on social media, Instagrams and whatnot. So we use that because our readers are young. Our readers are 18 to 34 years old. And their reading behavior has changed massively. The way they consume information has changed massively. They go through social media for their information, and often they believe more in influencers. The whole influencer culture has changed the way the media is perceived. And so we have to work within that, this change, and we have to, and so I think engagement is very big. We don't use social media just to promote our work, our stuff, but also to actually create content, and also to engage in conversation, and to amplify whatever message that we have. So that's why in every project that we do, we think of, from the beginning, we don't just think of the journalistic project itself, but how can we engage them just from the beginning. And when we were doing this project with the help of Henrik and Cynara, that's what we were doing. We bring the engagement team, and from the beginning, we decided on how we do this, how we tackle this engagement-wise.
And this was actually, for us, this surprise, because we thought, okay, now we're going to sit with some journalists and talk with them. But then Devi said, no, we need the engagement department involved right from the beginning, because it means just as much how they will tackle this than just the journalists. And that was really something we learned from you, how much that means. And again, not to promote this with constructive all the time, but there is this third pillar, if you remember, about the involvement. So the engagement, involvement, how can we work with the audience instead of to the audience? That meant a lot. So we then decided, and we want to spend a month, I think we spent on this big project. And this was after a vote among both the engagement and the journalists in Magdalene. They said, we want to try sex ed. That's what we should be looking into. So now we had we had the theme. So how to work constructive with that. And another thing that we had just been helping with was data journalism, which again was something I felt was great to take with me home, that because you had been doing data journalism and knew how to do your own surveys, that was really a strength in this project. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Then I can show the campaign that came out of it.
Yeah, so we know that in order for our project to have to be more valid, we have to come up with data. The problem is that in Indonesia there's not much data that we needed for this project, which is like, what do teenagers think about sexual education, their sexual behaviors, and their perception on sexuality and things like that. So we ourselves conducted the survey, and it involves like more than 400 people, and they are aged 15 to 19 years old. We feel that it's important to listen to their voices instead of, like I said, doing prescriptively, which is what has been a lot of the stuff that's been happening in regards to sexuality issues. And so we did that with the survey, and we came up with these findings, which is 98.5% think that, of course, they need comprehensive sexual education. And despite the fact that they are not actually engaged in sexual activities at the moment of the survey, and also that they don't plan to have to be sexually active before marriage, but they still feel the need to have a sexual education, a comprehensive sexual education. And so we also find that another important finding is that 1 in 10 respondents who said that they have been in romantic relationship admit to having had been victims of violence, including physical, verbal, sexual, and extortion and online violence. And only 93% of them said that they had received some sort of information on sexuality, not sexual education, but information on sexuality. And this is another thing that might be interesting, is that the lack of sexual education turned people to porn. So a lot of our respondents say that they go to porn for educational purpose, and of course this has various implications, right? The way they perceive sexuality and also relationship and things like that. So so there's a lot of stuff that we get out of the survey. We also, we get the sexual behaviors of these young people and their perception as well, and knowledge as well on sexuality. In general, they know the basic of sexuality and reproductive system, but there's also some stuff that we think they would have answered correctly if they had been exposed to comprehensive sexual education. So.
And then there were still some taboos, because I remember when we did the training, and then it was about, okay, we can do this about porn, we can do this about violence and so on. And then I was asking, but what about females who actually like sex and get something out of it? And then your people say, no, that's a no-go. Don't talk about that. Sexual behavior is there for the man. So that was like where we crashed into this again, the cultural limit.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it that way. I think what happens is that in Indonesia itself, sexuality has always been it's more permitted for men to engage in the conversation or to be open about it rather than women. If you talk, women, talk about sexuality, it'll be like a different sort of women that would, be labeled and have this older social stigmas. So, but the interesting thing is that a lot of women, as this survey found, turn to pornography for exactly the sexual, for the educational purpose. So we think that is pretty important. And so one of our in-depth story focuses on this pornography, and within it we try to, not only that we interview people and get their sense on this, but we also cover other aspect, which is called the feminist porn. Supposedly there are some, porns that has some kind of feminist tone or whatever. But, it's just to show that, women are also thinking about sexuality in Indonesia, but it's just they're not saying it out loud, and instead they go to resources like that. So.
Oh, you're right. That's exactly where the difference was. But let's have a look at the page, what it ends, because you made a microsite, and then we'll talk about the impact of that afterwards. But if we can just go through it. It's coming here. I'll try to. Yeah, so you can run.
Yeah, this is the English version. So hang on. Can you see it? No.
Yeah. No, it has to.
Maybe it won't work.
Yeah, I don't think it works. Yeah, it's okay. I think.
Why is it not showing up on the screen what we have on this one?
So that's not PowerPoint.
Yeah, because this is a different window.
No,
I
it
think
is
it's-
it is the one.
No, it's a I think they were focusing on that sort of things. But it's okay.
Okay.
I think we can move on to the next.
No, but I cannot. Sorry, we have a problem here.
No, it's a. Yeah.
So we need to go back to the. If we want to show this.
Yeah. Yeah. So in addition to the microsite, where we put all this findings and the in-depth stories, we also do other engagement stuff. From the beginning, when we started, before we even publish our findings, we have started with conversation pieces on our social media. We ask people what they think they need when it comes to, they need to know when it comes to sexuality. And so we get people to start talking about it, and we curate their answers, and we create posts out of that. And we also create quizzes, which sounds kind of girlish, but it's also very effective to get people, and it's very shareable and viral. So we get thousands of people doing that quiz on sexuality. And then we link those quizzes to small, short videos, kind of explainer videos. And people were excited to share this or to talk about this. And I think that's how we go beyond, the usual, in-depth stories or journalistic piece. So these are some of the findings. Because our audience are young, so we use a lot of illustrations. Yes, and so the other thing is that while we're doing this, we, as part of this, part of the pillar number 3, right?
Yes,
where
exactly.
is the conversation, is that we held a public roundtable discussions involving people from various backgrounds, young, the teenager. There is government from the education ministry. There is Islamic Islamic scholar, and then there are, so there's various people and teachers as well, and we get them in this roundtable discussion to talk about this issue, to find out like what they perceive the problem is, and how they can go forward, what sort of comprehensive education, sex ed that they feel is ideal. And then from that, we created podcasts as well as videos on that. So these are some of the things that we go beyond, the microsign. So you want to, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point about that, because I thought it was particularly interesting in the training and then in the project itself, is that Magdalene and all the team was saying, we don't want to be seen as this feminist media on the extreme left that doesn't speak to religious figures, that has a really particular stance. We don't want to be seen as the enemy. We want to be seen as the bridge. And we want to bring the more conservative elements in Indonesian society in the same room as us to have a conversation about this issue. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really one of the things that was really exciting about that project, because I think it's so easy to be seen as for progressive, liberal, open values, or to be for yeah, but we had conversations about, well, what happens if you're a very religious feminist in Indonesia? Do you have to pick a side? Or could Magdalena create a space or create these conversations and events where you can be both? I think that was something really exciting that came out of the project, that this was a conversation for everyone and people shouldn't be felt left out of it.
Yeah, thank you. That was very good.
But what about, now the critical question we often get is, isn't that activism more than journalism you're doing when you're talking about all these things? That's at least what we are being accused of often to do.
Yeah, I think you guys can also answer this, but for me, we're not activists, that's for sure. I mean, I don't come from activist background. What we do is take our journalistic work to another level, is to, like I said, to become part of the solution. Is what we do is to shift the way we conduct journalism in a space or in a world where things have changed so much, where the news, where people have been so polarized, where there's an increasing aversion to media, And so, and of course, the younger people, they believe in influencers more than they believe in the media. And so we try to kind of adjust ourselves to that, evolve to that, because otherwise I think we're going to be left behind, in terms of being relevant, but also in terms of to fulfill our mission, basically. So.
And then let's hear how it actually turned out. What about the impact, readers, and so on?
Yeah, well, I think it's, we're still, like I said, we're still a small media, but, we have quite good readability. Within a month, we have like 16,000 page views, and we have, I think, hundreds of thousands of reach and engagement on social media itself because of the different stuff that we're doing, and, podcast download and things like that. But the important thing, I think, is that we give space for people to talk about this in a healthy manner, in a healthy discussion, and also to uncover or to unpack some of the things that is part of this when we talk about sex ed. It's not just talking about sexuality, but also talking about the implication of not having one, of other things such as violence, sexual violence, and things like that. So I think, of course, the long-term impact is yet to be seen, but but it's just that it also gives us a feedback for the way we're going to go forward from there, like how we can conduct ourselves, with future projects and things like that.
Great. I just want to show you here one of the tools that we're working with. So that's when we did that, each story we had this rule that at least 2 of these things should be there. It should be either critical, solution-oriented, involving the audience, and be nuanced. At least 2 of those things should come up in a story. Otherwise, it should not be in there. And then we call that the compass. And then Magdalene, you went in when you saw that compass in the English version of this manual that we have, that you can handbook, that you can take an example of if you want. Then you put in for the Indonesian one extra element, and why was that?
Yeah, we put in listen in addition to those 4 items. Because, like I said, when we think about us as a media organization, we want to reflect, we want to be the mirror of society as well, and for that we have to listen to them. We have to listen to them to help inform us in how we approach our journalistic work, in how we communicate, and how we create our messaging. And if not, it's just going to be a one-way street, you know. And I think like being a new type of media that we were talking about earlier, listening is a really important part of this. Yeah. So do you want to add to that or something?
No, I just think it's a great example that these things aren't rigid, and the team felt that constructive compass might be useful, but it was incomplete. And so it's a constantly evolving conversation about what the journalist needs, and it's not a rigid set of tools that must be followed. And I think Magdalena really kind of took on these things on board and knew what worked for them and just what didn't. And that's what we were looking for.
Great. We have a copy of, because we also made this manual into Indonesian, or you did it, made your version of it that you can see, and then we have a Danish-made one that we did originally, and this is also being translated into Arabic now. So it's about spreading it. And for that, just as a short question, how are you going to move forward now?
I have moved forward. We have like for the March month, which is International Women's Day month, we had another project, and we use this tool. We use this approach similar to what we did with sexual education. We start by listening. We involve the engagement team from the beginning. We even ended with a big kind of festival to wrap this up. So I think forward, it's always going to be like looking at this compass, but also like, yeah. Yeah, I think for this there is some good resources out there, but one thing to remember is to always put the victims first, prioritize on the victims, and sometimes we don't even call victims anymore, we call them survivors. Is to know. I mean, even sometimes maybe you don't speak to them if it's too much, because you create a lot of. So go to like we call pendamping, which is like somebody who. Or somebody who accompanies them, whether it's legally or psychologically. Often we go through them. Of course, there's no identity and things like that. So I think the main thing is to always focus on the survivors, and secondly to find some good resources on the internet on that. I even took part in this FGD to create a book on how to cover sexual violence. This is an international, I think Rutgers Institute created this or published this book. So.
Yeah, Lars?
Yeah, Lars from IMS. I'm just wondering, creating solutions or digging into solutions would also require another level of expertise.
Oh, yeah.
And be curious to know how you cope with that.
Yeah.
And also, do you collaborate with any NGOs or CSOs in this regard?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, of course, we are very aware of that, and so that's why I don't think we provide solutions most of the time. Most of the time, we just direct people to the existing solutions or the possible solutions. And so our staff, we're very short staff. Our staff are journalists or writers and journalists and researchers and whatnot. And so they don't have the expertise, of course, issue-wise. But oftentimes, like you said, we do work with or collaborate with organizations or with some experts. Like for the sex ed, we collaborated with somebody who is in the space of sexual reproductive health rights. And she helped us with creating the questions for the surveys and things like that. So I think it's important to be aware of your shortcomings, of course, and to work with the right people, to partner with the right groups or organizations or people.
Okay. Yep.
One more.
Just one question. Did you get any feedback from public institutions? How ministry or people who
Yeah.
have done better sexual education because this would have been better?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We invited them for our talk, and a couple of people from the government attended, quite high-ranking officials. But, we haven't got really like direct feedback. But I think, it's just the way the politics work in Indonesia. But I think little by little, with this project like this, where we get a lot of kind of eyeballs and when it goes viral, it goes into this, momentum that hopefully it will become something. It'll result in something. But not so far. And like I said, also sexuality is also a political issue in Indonesia. So a lot of the times people are afraid to touch that issue like politically.
Yeah, we have one more.
Do you find yourself like alone in the Indonesia media ecosystem, or are there more media addressing gender, feminism?
Yeah. Now, ever since we were founded, we see some more, maybe one or two media organizations that come out. A lot of them are very small and very kind of activist-based, and in fact, they were founded by activists. I think one of our strengths is that both Hera and me, we were the founders, we were journalists. We had no activism background, so we had this kind of staying power through whatever we did. We were like, we're just doing this as journalists. And whereas others came from kind of activist background, and so they couldn't really, step up their game, or they couldn't last in that sense, because it's not easy to run a startup media, right?
Okay, I think we have to end now, but thank you very much for coming. I'll just say, just a moment, that you can, in the program, you can find our websites, and we are very happy to talk with you if you want to copy this or go on with it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Take it. You like it?
Oh,
Great.
Sure. Can I take a
Thank you
picture
very much.
first here?
It's the one I promised you, actually.
Mobil fotoin. Yeah.